Mary is the Chief Resource Officer for Sapphire, one of the country's largest and most successful staffing companies with headquarters in Cincinnati, Ohio. Sapphire's primary focus of delivering exceptional people and exemplary results is a perfect match for Mary's philosophy. She has more than 25 years of experience working in the people business, which she actually describes the staffing workforce and workforce management industry. Along the way, she has coached individuals at all organizational levels to successfully reach goals, enhance working relationships, improve employee retention, and elevate team performance. Mary literally worked her way up the corporate ladder. She began her career as a customer service rep for a temporary health company in her hometown of Kansas City and climbed the ladder up to her current executive position with Sapphire. In her spare time, Mary authored the critically acclaimed book, Lunch Meat and Life Lessons, Sharing a Butcher's Wisdom, which debuted in December of 2006 and is now in its 10th printing. As a result of her book's literary success and loyal readers, she is now a frequently requested speaker for a variety of groups around the country and gives generously to support the work of American Heart Association in honor of her parents who inspired her to inspire others. Mary has been married to her husband Scott for over 23 years, and they have two sons in college, Chase and Nick. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Mary Lewis.
Thank you. Great job. Good evening, everyone, and first faculty and staff, thank you so much for having me. To all of you families and friends, I'm thrilled to be a part of this celebration, but most of all to all of you graduates, congratulations. I'm happy to be with you tonight to celebrate your big day. So, as you just heard, my background is in the people business. I was born number 9 of 10 children to John and Mary Bicklemeyer of Shawnee, Kansas. When we said our prayers at night, we would say, God bless Joan, Judy, Johnny, Jimmy, Joey, Jerry, Jeannie, Jane, Mary, and Barbara. So when you're number 9 of 10 children, you get your start in the people business from birth. And then when I graduated, I went straight into the staffing industry, and my dad, who was a butcher, told me, you're going into the people business. That's what you're going to do. I'm a butcher and I'm in the people business. Doesn't matter who you meet and who you interact with in your life, we're all in the people business. So here I am to share some stories with all of you, courtesy of my dad, about how to succeed in the people business as you all write the next chapters of your life. So here goes. When I graduated, my dad called me over to the family kitchen and the butcher block in the family kitchen. We had a huge butcher block table in the middle of our kitchen, and it was the gathering place. And my dad was the kind of guy that would hold court at that butcher block table and dish out food for thought and inspiration every chance he got. So here he was, John Bicklemeyer, father of 10, successful businessman, Bicklemeyer Meats in Kansas City, Kansas. And here I was, a 22-year-old, recent graduate, a little full of myself. And I'm sure none of you were ever 22, families, friends, or graduates, and full of yourself, but I was. And my dad decided that he was going to share some advice and wisdom with me that he said would help me succeed in the people business. So I sat down across from him and I kind of rolled my eyes, and he looked at me and he said, all right, tomorrow when you start your first day on your new job, I want you to remember that the first hunk of meat you sell is yourself. I didn't laugh either. I kind of looked at him and I thought, really? You want to tell your recent college graduate that the first hunk of meat you sell is yourself? And he said, yes. That's what I want to tell you, and if it makes you feel better about yourself, then you can just say, you never get a second chance to make a first impression. I'm going to tell you, however, that one of the most important things that you can remember as you venture out in your new career is that every time you interact with someone for the first time, you need to be mindful of the impression you're making on them. And that's exactly what I started thinking about, and I thought maybe I should listen to my dad. When I looked at him, he was the most successful man I'd ever met. He was successful financially. Most importantly, he had an incredible family that was devoted to him beyond anyone I'd ever seen. Not to take anything away from my mom. I could have easily written a book about her called Laundry and Life Lessons. I was so close to my mom growing up in that safe haven, you know, when you're folding towels with your mom. And I said before, I could have written that book about her because she was the kind of woman that when she passed away, we had by her tombstone, a mother is the only person on earth who can have 10 children, and yet each child have all her love. However, my mom wasn't quite as out there and outgoing as my dad, and he's the one who wanted to give me advice. And I remember right after he told me, the first time I met you, sell yourself, that I started thinking about, he really does know a thing or two about being successful. Even though he has an 8th grade education, he's the smartest guy I've ever met. He has a following like no one I've ever met before. Maybe I should listen to him. And I told him, I grabbed some salami, white bread, warm German beer. I was of age. And I said, Dad, all right, I'm ready to listen. What else do you have to tell me? Lay it on me. And he said, all right, I'm going to tell you something else. Don't just be mindful about making a great first impression. Think every time you interact with someone about making a lasting impression. Okay, Dad, what do you mean by that? Well, when I opened the meat market, I had 5 mouths to feed, 3 kids and your mom and me. And here I was, saved enough money. I had to move in after I graduated from 8th grade into Kansas City, Kansas, send money home to my family. I was one of 10 children. And I finally had realized my dream. I was going to have my own business. So I opened up my doors, and the next thing you know, the 2 guys I took with me from Mr. Snow's came in one morning. They'd been down at KCK at Sammy's bar, and they said, John, we're in trouble. What do you mean we're in trouble, Dad said. We were at Sammy's bar last night, and there were a couple of your competitors, including Mr. Snow, and they have a plan, they said, to put you out of business. They said they're going to, every time you advertise a price per pound, they're going to advertise 10 cents per pound cheaper until you can't afford to be in business any longer. And Dad said he looked at him, and you could tell they were really worried. He said, John, do you think he'll take us back? Do you think we can work there again once you close down? And Dad said, guys, no worries. The joke's on them. We don't have any money to advertise. All we got is the quality of the product we sell, the roof over our head, the knives we use, and what little we pay ourselves. Oh, wait a minute, we got comeback sauce. You put the comeback sauce on everybody who comes in here and we'll be just fine. Dad said, the guys looked at him and said, what do you mean comeback sauce, John? He goes, I don't know. You figure it out. One person at a time, one customer at a time, one interaction at a time. Here's what you do. See the guy that just came in a little bit earlier? He said he had a hard week. His wife was sick, his baby was sick, and he was ordering a pound of ground beef for some spaghetti red. And you turn to him, and after you give him the pound of ground beef, you wink at him and you say, I know you had a hard week. And you top it off with a little extra, you take it off the scale, you give him the extra, and you say, you come back and see us, we will always take care of you. And you can rest assured that any time you come back to Bicklemeyer Meats, we'll take care of you. And your friends too. Please come back and see us. That's the recipe for comeback sauce for him. Well, guess what? All of you graduates, you're going to all go into lots of different, you're going to have lots of different opportunities to interact with people and pour some comeback sauce on them. And I remember saying to Dad, I'm in the staffing industry. I don't want everybody to come back. I can't hire everybody. And he said, you certainly do want to pour comeback sauce on everybody. Doesn't matter who you interact with. You're going to want to make sure you leave them with the feeling that the interaction they had with you is the kind of interaction that even if you can't work with them again, they want to share it with others. You never know who they're related to, their brother, sister, mother, father. You never know who they're going to be connecting with. You make sure that you pour the comeback sauce on everyone you meet, and you're going to be just fine. And I remember thinking all those years as my career went on and on and on, that he was right. Be mindful of the first impressions you make a lasting impression. And most importantly, I think what he taught me was you want to make a positive impression. And I'll never forget this one. I'm sure none of you, friends, family, staff, or faculty, have ever worked with anyone you didn't like, right? You probably haven't. Well, I have. And I remember the first time I was tested after I decided that Dad was going to be my career coach was when I had to work with a woman who was really impossible. She was my customer, and she was hard to work with. She was really hard to deal with, and she was kind of mean at times, and she would yell at me sometimes. And I remember one particular time we were supposed to have 16 people show up for a job one morning, and we had 13 show up, and she just ripped me up one side and down the other. She was so angry about the 3 no-shows. And I remember it was Monday that day, and I remember Dad was always off. The meat market was closed on Sundays and Mondays. Sunday for our Lord's Day and Monday for Dad's Day. St. John's Day, he called it. He always wanted a weekend, so I drove out during my lunchtime and I told Dad all about this woman, Lisa Gray, who was impossible to work with, so mean. And Dad looked at me and he said, "She's your biggest client, huh?" "Yep." "You don't have another client to replace her with that big?" "Nope." "What would happen if you didn't have her as a client anymore?" And I said, "Well, it would be bad news. I'd probably have to lay someone off. It wouldn't be very good." He said, "Well, then I figure you go back to your office and you do what you have to do. You find the like." "Dad, what do you mean, find the like? What kind of advice is that? Go back to your office, find the like." He said, "It's really simple. You've been whining about her for the last 15 minutes. You need to go back to your office and find the like. It's as simple as that." I was so mad. I said, "What are you talking about? This isn't great advice. She's impossible. No one likes her." He said, "Well, you certainly don't, and that's your problem. Have you ever heard the phrase, if you don't like somebody, then they don't like you?" And I looked at him and said, "No," but he said, "You don't like her, so I guess she doesn't like you either." I said, "Well, that's impossible. I'm me. Everyone likes me." He said, "Not so much. Go back to your office and find the like." And I was so mad, and I drove back to my office that day, and I walked in, a couple of the other people at the office were there, and I said, walked in the door, and I could hear one of the people at the front desk saying, "I know, I can't help that. Mary's walking in right now. I can't help that. All right, we'll get back with you." She hung up the phone. I knew who she was talking to. And at the end of it, she said, "That Lisa Gray is the biggest," and she started to say something negative about our biggest client. And it was immediately that moment that I got it. I understood my dad's wisdom. Find the like. So I walked in the office. I said, "You guys, let's all get together. Let's have a mini meeting." Closed the door, looked at everybody, and I said, "Look, we have a problem. We don't like Lisa Gray." And they looked at me like I looked at my dad. "You're crazy. Of course we don't like her. She's impossible. No one likes her." I said, "I know. And we thought that we were so great that we got her because we were great salespeople. We got her because nobody likes her. They probably fired her. The other people she worked with. We need to find the like." And they looked at me like I was crazy. "Well, how do you propose we do that, Mary?" I said, "I don't know. Let's do it one interaction at a time." And I said, "You know what? From now on, anytime anyone says something negative about her," and I emptied out the candy jar, and I said, "You put a quarter in the kitty. And anytime somebody says something positive about her, we're going to put a hash mark. The person at the end of the week who has the most nice things to say about her, that's the person who's going to end up getting all the money in the candy jar." So the next thing you know, we started working at it. We started working at finding the like. We started practicing what my dad said. You have 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. Listen twice as much as you talk. And so we started asking her questions that would bring out the best, that would help her make sure that she knew that we were looking for the good in her, not just focusing on the bad. And the next thing you know, that year when we were supposed to have our Christmas gift that we were supposed to give to our clients, that was a clock, we didn't give that to her because at the end of one phone call, when she was done yelling and I paused and I started asking her questions that would bring out the best in her, I said, "What did you do this weekend, Lisa?" And she said, "I worked on a Victorian dollhouse for my granddaughter's Christmas gift and I wallpapered the nursery." I said, "Really?" She said, "I wish I could find a little crib to go in that nursery because I think if I could find that, I'd be almost complete with her Christmas gift." And this is before you could Google and find this. I pulled out the yellow pages, found a place that had a little miniature crib, and instead of giving her the gift that we were supposed to give her, this clock, I drove out, found that crib, delivered it to her that day, and because I kept asking questions that would bring out the best with her, I gave her a gift that meant something to her, specifically for her. I didn't just like her at this point, I loved her. She was my biggest client until they moved their headquarters to Atlanta. And I realized one of the lessons that I learned from Dad is that you have to work at finding the like in the people that you don't like. And you're all going to have that. You're going to go out there and you're going to work in places and have experiences where you have to find ways to find the best in the people around you. And that's one of the lessons I think that inspired me the most. First, positive and lasting impressions. And I think, too, the whole idea that Dad gave me about the comeback sauce, finding the like, first time to meet yourself, were all things that predicated what I really look at as the most important lesson he taught me was the lesson he taught me and the impression he left with me on his last day. So you see the book, Lunch, Meat, and Life Lessons, Sharing a Butcher's Wisdom. I wrote it after my father's passing because I didn't know how I was going to share all the life lessons he taught with me with my two boys, Chase and Nick. And I didn't write it because I'd be in front of groups like you. Frankly, that was the last thing I thought of. I just wanted to capture his wisdom from my family. And little did I know that thousands and thousands of people later, we would be talking about my dad's wisdom in boardrooms and in classrooms all over the country. And it really all started with the last story that I'm going to share with you tonight. My dad was 88 years old. He lived longer than any man in the Bickelmeyer family history. My mom had passed away about 5 years before, and my dad found out that my oldest sister Joan, who had esophageal cancer, was going to pass away. And he had already buried one child, my older brother Johnny, and I think he decided, you know what, I've lived a good life. He signed the do not resuscitate order for my sister Joan, drove himself to Shawnee Mission Medical Center, and they told him he had congestive heart failure and that he wasn't going to make it through the week. And he said, you know what, I've lived a good life. I'm not going to have that quadruple bypass. What I want to do is I want to live out the rest of my life. And that's what he did. He went home, left envelopes for all of us, left us different notes and shared with us different things he wanted us to do after his passing. And the last day of his life, he was back in the hospital, and they told us that he didn't have much longer to live. And we were all so busy with my sister's illness and my dad's illness. So the next thing you know, my little sister Barbie, again, Joan, Judy, Johnny, Jimmy, Joey, Jerry, Ginny, Jane, Mary, and Barbara, Barbie, the boss of the family, said, Mary, you stay with Dad. And everybody else was going off with Joan or finding ways to make sure we took care of all the things that were going on in our family at that time. And I remember I found myself alone with my dad in his hospital room. And I was kind of uncomfortable, and my arms were crossed. And Dad looked across the hospital room at me, and he said, are you okay? You look so uncomfortable. And I said, doesn't matter how I feel, Dad. It's all about you. Are you okay? And he said, yeah, I'm fine. I'm really comfortable. Why don't you climb on up here and snuggle with me? Nobody cares. These nurses love me. He'd been pouring comeback sauce on all the nurses. I climbed up and snuggled with him in the bed, and I remember I started to cry because I knew his end was near. And I was shaking a little bit, and he said, really, Mary, are you okay? And I looked up at him and I said, really, Dad, are you okay? He said, yes. I am proud of who I am and what I've done. I like what I see in the mirror. If this is how it ends for me, then this is how it ends for me. And I looked up at him and I said, good for you. I'm so happy for you, Dad. But what am I going to do? You're my career coach. You're my go-to guy. You're the guy who shares all kinds of stories with me and lessons with me that help me get through the tough times in my career and in my life. What am I going to do now? And without missing a beat, he just looked down at me and he said, oh, Mary, that's so easy. Your mother and I have taught you well. Inspire yourself. Inspire yourself. And that's the last lesson he shared with me, and that was the inspiration for the book. And I only had a chance to share a few of the stories with you. There's so many more in the book. If I can leave you, though, with one last lesson, it's that I wish all of you, faculty, staff, friends, family, and most of all you graduates, as you go through your careers and as you write the next chapter of your life, I wish you all the best as you inspire yourselves. Thank you.
Thank you.